You know, I've got to tell you something that changed my entire life, and if you really hear what I'm saying here, it'll change yours too. Most people are walking around as prisoners, and they don't even know it. They're locked up, confined, restricted, not by circumstances, not by other people, not by lack of opportunity, but by their own thinking. That's right. The jail cell's between your ears, and you're both the prisoner and the guard holding the keys. Let me tell you what I've learned after all these years of studying success and human behavior. We become what we think about most of the time. Not what we wish for, not what we hope for, not what we intend to become, but what we actually think about day after day, hour after hour. Your mind is working right now, this very second, either for you or against you. There's no neutral ground here. It's either building you up or tearing you down, moving you forward or holding you back. I remember back when I was 25 years old, broke, with nothing to show for my life. I had more excuses than money. And that's saying something because I didn't have any money at all. But here's what I didn't understand then. My biggest problem wasn't my bank account. It was my thinking account. I was bankrupt upstairs before I was bankrupt in my wallet. Every morning I'd wake up, and before my feet hit the floor, my mind was already running wild with thoughts of what I couldn't do, what I didn't have, why things wouldn't work out. I was feeding myself poison for breakfast, and then wondering why I felt sick all day. The fascinating thing about the human mind is that it's exactly like a garden. Now, you've seen gardens before. You know what happens when you plant tomato seeds. You get tomatoes. Plant corn seeds. You get corn. Plant nothing. Well, you still get something. You get weeds. Lots of them. The garden doesn't care whether you're deliberate about what you plant or not. It's going to produce something. Your mind works the same way. You can plant thoughts of success, achievement, contribution, and growth, or you can plant thoughts of fear, limitation, resentment, and doubt. Or you can plant nothing at all and let whatever random seeds blow in from the wind take root. But make no mistake, something is going to grow. Here's what most people miss. They think their thoughts are just thoughts, harmless, floating around like clouds. They don't realize that thoughts are things. They're seeds. And whatever you plant today, you're going to harvest tomorrow. I spent years planting worry and harvesting anxiety. I planted doubt and harvested failure. I planted excuse after excuse and harvested a life full of missed opportunities. It wasn't until someone got a hold of me and shook me up that I understood I was doing this to myself. Let me give you a specific example. Back in those early struggling years, I had an opportunity to start a small business. Nothing major. Just a chance to get off the ground. But my mind immediately went to work against me. You don't have enough money. You don't know enough people. What if it doesn't work? Remember last time you tried something? On and on and on. I listened to every one of those thoughts like they were the absolute truth, like they were carved in stone tablets handed down from above. So what did I do? Nothing. I let the opportunity pass. And then my mind said, see, you don't have any opportunities. Wait a minute. I just had one and I let it go by. But that's how an undisciplined mind works. It creates its own evidence for why you should stay stuck. The tragedy is that I didn't do this just once. I did it over and over again. Every time a possibility showed up, my mind was right there with a dozen reasons why it wouldn't work. Every time I thought about making a change, my thoughts pulled me back into the familiar. And familiar doesn't mean good, duh. Familiar just means familiar. You can be familiarly broke. You can be familiarly unhappy. You can be familiarly stuck. That's where I was living, in the familiar prison of my own thinking patterns. Now, here's something crucial you need to understand. When I finally started turning things around, when my life finally started working, when I finally started making money and building something worthwhile, nothing in my external circumstances changed first. The economy didn't get better for me personally. People didn't suddenly start liking me more. Opportunities didn't fall from the sky. What changed was between my ears. I started taking control of what I was thinking about. I started being deliberate about the thoughts I would entertain and the thoughts I would dismiss. You see, there's a massive difference between reacting to life and responding to life. Most people are in reaction mode. Something happens and boom, they react with whatever thought pattern they've developed over the years. Traffic's bad, they react with frustration. Someone criticizes them, they react with hurt or anger. Business is slow, they react with panic. They're like puppets, and life is pulling their strings through their uncontrolled thoughts. But when you start responding instead of reacting, everything shifts. A response is intentional. A response says, wait a minute, what's the most useful way to think about this? What thought will serve me here? What mental approach will move me forward rather than backward? Let me tell you about a conversation I had with a young man who was struggling in his sales career. He kept telling me that rejection was killing him. Every no he got sent him into a spiral. His mind would say, you're no good at this. You don't have what it takes. Maybe you should quit and do something else. And because he wasn't controlling his mind, he believed it. So I asked him, when someone says no to you, what exactly happens? Do they hit you? Do you lose something you already had? He looked at me confused. I said, nothing actually happens except you think a thought about it. The no doesn't hurt you. Your undisciplined reaction to the no hurts you. That was a turning point for him. He realized he was creating his own pain through his thinking, and if he could create it, he could uncreate it by thinking differently. This is where it gets really interesting. Your mind, left to itself, will generally drift toward the negative. That's not pessimism talking, that's just reality. We're wired to spot problems, to see threats, to worry about what could go wrong. That's survival instinct from way back when we needed to watch out for predators. But in modern life, this default setting will destroy you. You don't need to be on the lookout for tigers anymore, but your mind still acts like there's danger everywhere. So it manufactures worry. It creates anxiety out of thin air. It takes a small problem and blows it up into a catastrophe. I used to lie awake at night, and my mind would put on a horror show for me. It would show me everything that could go wrong, every worst-case scenario, every possible failure. And I'd watch it all like I was sitting in a theater with no exit door. My heart would race, my stomach would knot up, and I'd feel terrible. But nothing was actually happening. I was in bed, safe, but my thoughts were creating a reality that didn't exist. The next morning, I'd be exhausted, not from real problems, but from imaginary ones my undisciplined mind had conjured up. The truth is, and this is fundamental, you cannot afford the luxury of a negative thought, not even one, because one leads to two, two leads to four, four leads to eight. It's like compound interest working against you. Every negative thought attracts more negative thoughts. Every worry invites more worries. Every fear breeds more fears. Before you know it, your entire mental state is overrun with negativity, and you're wondering why your life isn't working out. Well, it's working out exactly as you've designed it in your thinking. But here's the exciting part, and this is what got me fired up when I finally understood it. If the compound effect works against you with negative thinking, it also works for you with disciplined, constructive thinking. Every positive thought attracts more positive thoughts. Every solution-focused question leads to more solutions. Every moment you spend thinking about what you want instead of what you fear, you're building momentum in the right direction. The same mind that can destroy your dreams can build them, depending on who's controlling it, you or your random, undisciplined thought patterns. So when I say control your mind or your mind will control you, I'm not talking about some philosophical concept. I'm talking about the most practical thing in your life. You're either going to deliberately choose what you think about, or your thoughts are going to choose themselves based on habit, based on what you've always thought, based on whatever random stimulus comes your way. And if you let them choose themselves, I can tell you where you'll end up. Stuck, frustrated, and wondering why you never got the life you wanted. The answer is simple, but not easy. You didn't control your mind, so your mind controlled you, and it took you somewhere you never wanted to go. Now let me tell you what happens when people just let their minds run on autopilot, because I've seen this destroy more lives than anything else. Mental laziness, that's what I call it. And it's the most expensive laziness there is. You can be lazy with your body and still recover. You can be lazy with your work for a day or two and catch up. But when you're lazy with your mind, when you just let it run wild without any discipline or direction, you're setting yourself up for a lifetime of struggle. I knew a man once. brilliant fella, had everything going for him. Good education, supportive family, plenty of opportunities. But he had this habit. Every morning, he'd wake up, and the first thing he'd do is start worrying. He'd worry about his job, worry about money, worry about what people thought of him, worry about his health. It became his ritual, his morning routine. Worry, worry, worry. And you know what? After 20 years of this daily practice, he'd become a master at worrying. He could find something to worry about in any situation. Good news? He'd worry it wouldn't last. Bad news? He'd worry it would get worse. No news? He'd worry about what he didn't know. This man had potential written all over him, but worry ate it all up. He never took the big opportunities because worry convinced him they were too risky. He never built deep relationships because worry told him people would let him down. He never enjoyed his successes because worry reminded him they could disappear. By the time he was 50, he'd worried himself into a small, fearful life. And the tragic thing, nothing he worried about ever happened. He spent 50 years preparing for disasters that never came. And in the process, he missed the life he could have lived. That's the real cost of mental laziness. You don't just stay where you are, you actually go backwards. Because while you're sitting there letting your mind run wild with negative thoughts, other people are moving forward. While you're entertaining every fear and doubt that pops into your head, other people are taking action. While you're having mental conversations about why things won't work, other people are out there making things work. Time passes the same for everyone, but an undisciplined mind makes sure you waste yours. Here's what I've learned about how this works. One pessimistic thought is like a tiny crack in a dam. Seems harmless enough, but that crack lets in a little water, which creates pressure, which makes the crack bigger, which lets in more water. Before long, you've got a flood. That's exactly what happens with your thinking. You have one thought, I'm not good enough for this, seems small. But then that thought invites another, I never finish what I start. That invites another, other people have advantages I don't have. And another, maybe I'm just not meant to succeed. Each thought makes the next one easier to believe until you've got a whole belief system built on that first lazy thought you didn't challenge. I remember working with a young woman who wanted to start her own business. She had the skills, the knowledge, even some money saved up. But every time we'd meet, she'd have a new reason why now wasn't the right time. First, it was the economy. Then it was her age, too young. Nobody would take her seriously. Then she needed more experience. Then she needed more connections. I watched her for 3 years. And you know what I realized? Her mind was running her life, and it was running her in circles. She wasn't making decisions. Her undisciplined thoughts were making decisions for her. And they always decided the same thing. Stay safe, don't risk, wait for perfect conditions. The heartbreaking part, 3 years later, someone else started the exact business she'd been thinking about in her same town, with less experience than she had, and it succeeded. She came to me devastated, and I had to tell her the truth. Your mind controlled you. It kept you safe, kept you comfortable, kept you stuck. And now you're watching someone else live the life you could have lived because they controlled their mind and you didn't control yours. Let me tell you about the financial cost of mental laziness, because it's staggering. Every time fear talks you out of an opportunity, that's money gone. Every time doubt prevents you from asking for the sale, for the raise, for the promotion, that's money gone. Every time worry keeps you up at night instead of letting you rest so you can perform at your best, that's money gone. I calculated it once for myself, back in my struggling years. If I just controlled my fearful thinking and taken half the opportunities that came my way, I would have been financially independent 5 years earlier. 5 years. That's not just money, that's time, experiences, the ability to help my family. All lost because I let my mind control me instead of me controlling it. But the financial cost is just the beginning. What about the emotional cost? When you don't control your mind, you live in constant turmoil. Your emotions are just responding to whatever random thoughts you're having. 1 minute you're hopeful, the next minute you're depressed. 1 minute you're confident, the next minute you're full of self-doubt. You're on an emotional roller coaster, and you don't even realize you're the one operating it. Your undisciplined thoughts are jerking you around, and you're exhausted from it all. Then there's the relational cost. Show me someone with an undisciplined mind, and I'll show you someone with troubled relationships. Why? Because when you don't control your thoughts, You don't control your interpretations. Your spouse forgets to call. Your undisciplined mind says they don't care. Your friend doesn't invite you to something. Your mind says you're not valued. Your boss gives you feedback. Your mind says you're about to be fired. None of these interpretations might be true, but your lazy mind reaches for them anyway because it's easier than thinking clearly and rationally. I watched a marriage fall apart once, and it broke my heart because it didn't have to happen. The husband had this habit of catastrophic thinking. Any little problem, his mind would immediately go to the worst possible scenario. His wife was late coming home from work. His mind said she was having an affair. Their finances got tight. His mind said they were headed for bankruptcy and divorce. She suggested they talk about something. His mind said she was going to leave him. Year after year of this, and eventually his undisciplined thinking created the very reality he feared. His constant suspicion, his constant anxiety, his constant negative interpretations pushed her away. His mind controlled him, and it controlled him right into losing what he loved most. Here's the thing about mental laziness. It feels easier in the moment. It's easier to just worry than to think through solutions. It's easier to just accept the first fearful thought than to question it and find a better one. It's easier to just react with anger or hurt than to respond with wisdom. But this easy path leads to a hard life. And the hard path, the path of mental discipline, of controlling your thoughts, of being deliberate about what you think, that leads to an easier life. You know what else I've noticed? Excuses are just mental pollution. That's all they are. When someone's mind is controlling them, they become an excuse factory. They can give you 47 reasons why something won't work before you finish explaining what it is. And they genuinely believe these excuses. Their undisciplined mind has convinced them that these are facts, when really they're just thoughts they haven't challenged. I had a man tell me once, Jim, I'd love to start my own business, but I'm too old. I'm 53. I said, too old compared to what? Too old compared to when you're 63 and wishing you'd started at 53? You see, his mind was feeding him this thought, and because he wasn't controlling his mind, he was accepting it as truth. 10 years later, he was still working a job he hated, still talking about what he wished he could do, still letting his mind control him with the same old excuse. The truth is this, and you need to hear this clearly. Every day you let your mind run wild without discipline, you're making a choice. You're choosing chaos over order, reaction over response, fear over faith in yourself, and these daily choices compound. They build on each other. They create patterns that become harder and harder to break. Mental laziness today becomes mental slavery tomorrow. Those random thoughts you're entertaining right now, those worries you're nursing, those negative interpretations you're accepting without question, they're not harmless, they're expensive. They're costing you your dreams, your peace, your potential, your relationships, and your future. But here's what gives me hope, and here's what should give you hope too. The moment you recognize this, the moment you see that your undisciplined mind has been running your life, that's the moment you can change it. You don't have to live under the tyranny of random thoughts anymore. You don't have to let fear make your decisions. You don't have to let worry steal your sleep. You don't have to let doubt talk you out of opportunities. You can take control. And when you do, when you finally say enough is enough, I'm taking charge of what goes on between my ears, that's when everything starts to shift. So now you're probably asking yourself, all right, Jim, I get it. My undisciplined mind has been running my life. But how do I actually take control? What do I do? That's the right question. And I'm going to give you the practical philosophy that changed everything for me. First thing you need to understand, taking control of your mind isn't something you do once. It's not like flipping a switch where suddenly you've got it all figured out and you're done. It's a daily practice, a set of disciplines you build into your life. And just like physical disciplines build a strong body, mental disciplines build a strong mind. Let me start with the morning, because that's where you either win or lose the day. What you do in the first hour after you wake up sets the tone for everything that follows. I learned this the hard way. For years, I'd wake up and immediately start thinking about my problems. Before I was even out of bed, my mind was churning through everything that was wrong, everything I had to worry about, all the reasons today was going to be difficult. I was programming myself for failure before breakfast. Then I made a decision. I decided that for the first 30 minutes of every day, I was going to control exactly what went into my mind. No news, no problems, no worries, just good input. I started reading philosophy, success literature, inspirational material, just 30 minutes. And you know what happened? Those 30 minutes changed my entire day. Because instead of starting with anxiety and fear, I was starting with wisdom and possibility. I was feeding my mind good food instead of poison. That one discipline, that one change had a ripple effect through everything else. Now, reading isn't just about feeling good, it's about reprogramming. See, your mind has been programmed by everything you've experienced, everything you've been told, everything you've absorbed over the years. Some of that programming is good, but a lot of it is garbage. Reading good books, studying successful people, learning new ideas, that's how you reprogram. You're installing new software in your mental computer. You're giving your mind better material to work with than the random stuff it's been using. But here's where most people miss it. They read something good, they feel inspired for an hour, and then they go right back into their old environment, their old associations, their old habits. And all that good input gets drowned out by the noise. That's why you've got to practice selective exposure. You've got to be ruthless about what you let into your mental space. I started asking myself a simple question about everything. Is this making me better or worse? That television show I'm watching, is it making me better or worse? That conversation I'm having, is it making me better or worse? That music I'm listening to, that news I'm consuming, that person I'm spending time with, better or worse? And if the answer was worse or even neutral, I cut it out. Your mind is taking in information all day long. And if you're not selective about what gets in, you're going to end up with a contaminated mind. Let me tell you about association, because this is critical. You cannot spend major time with negative people and expect to have a positive mind. It doesn't work that way. If you're hanging around people who complain all day, you're going to start complaining. If you're surrounding yourself with people who make excuses, you're going to start making excuses. If you're spending time with people who think small, you're going to think small. It's not judgment, it's just reality. Your mind absorbs the mental atmosphere of the people around you. I had to make some tough decisions about relationships when I started getting serious about controlling my mind. There were people I'd known for years, but every time I was around them, they were pulling me down. Negative talk, limiting beliefs, constant complaints. I had to create some distance. Not because I didn't care about them, but because I cared more about my future. You show me your friends, and I'll show you your future. That's not just a saying, that's a law of mental influence. Now, here's a discipline that will transform your thinking. Learn to question your thoughts instead of automatically believing them. Most people think whatever pops into their head must be true. A thought says you can't do this, and they believe it. A thought says this won't work, and they accept it. But thoughts are not facts. They're just thoughts, and you can question them. When a negative thought comes up, I've trained myself to stop and ask, is this true? How do I know it's true? What evidence do I have? Could there be another way to look at this? Most of the time, when you actually examine your negative thoughts, they fall apart. They're based on fear, not fact. They're based on old programming, not current reality. But if you don't question them, they run your life. Here's something powerful. The practice of interrupting negative thought patterns. The moment you catch yourself going down a mental rabbit hole of worry or fear or doubt, you interrupt it. Stop it right there. Don't let it play out. Some people say stop out loud. Some people snap a rubber band on their wrist. Some people immediately replace the negative thought with a constructive one. Whatever works for you, but you've got to interrupt the pattern. Because if you let that negative thought run its full course, it's going to trigger emotions, and those emotions are going to trigger more thoughts. And before you know it, you're in a full-blown negative spiral. Let me tell you about gratitude, because this is one of the most powerful mental disciplines there is. It's almost impossible to be grateful and negative at the same time. They don't coexist well. So I made it a practice. Every day, I write down things I'm grateful for. Not big, dramatic things necessarily, just real things. I'm grateful for my health. I'm grateful for this opportunity. I'm grateful for that conversation. I'm grateful for the lesson I learned from that mistake. This daily practice trains your mind to look for what's good instead of what's wrong. And what you look for, you find more of. Then there's mental rehearsal. This is something successful people do that unsuccessful people skip. Before the important meeting, before the sales call, before the difficult conversation, you mentally rehearse how you want it to go. You see yourself handling it well. You think through the best responses, the best approach. You're programming your mind for success instead of leaving it to chance. Athletes do this all the time. They visualize the perfect performance. Why? Because your mind doesn't know the difference between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. When you mentally rehearse success, you're training your brain to execute success. But here's what ties all these disciplines together: personal responsibility. You've got to take full responsibility for your mental state. Not partial responsibility, full responsibility. You can't say, I'm negative because of my childhood, or I worry because of my circumstances, or I'm fearful because of what happened to me. All that might be true, but it doesn't matter anymore. Right now, in this moment, your mind is your responsibility. What you think about is your choice. The thoughts you entertain are your decision. Nobody else can control your mind unless you give them that power. I'll never forget the day I truly got this. I was blaming everyone and everything for my situation. The economy, the government, my upbringing, my lack of education, the people who didn't help me. I had a whole list. And then someone said to me, Jim, you can keep blaming everyone else and you'll stay exactly where you are. Or you can take responsibility and you'll have the power to change. That hit me hard. As long as I was blaming, I was powerless. The moment I took responsibility, I had power. These disciplines, morning routine, reading, selective exposure, right associations, questioning thoughts, interrupting negative patterns, gratitude, mental rehearsal, personal responsibility. They're not complicated, but they require something from you. They require consistency. They require that you show up every single day and do the work of controlling your mind. Because your mind is like a wild horse. You can tame it, but only through daily, consistent discipline. Let me tell you what happens when someone finally takes full responsibility for their mental state and starts practicing these disciplines every single day. The transformation is remarkable. I've seen it hundreds of times, and I've lived it myself. There was a woman I worked with years ago, absolutely paralyzed by fear and self-doubt. She'd been that way for so long, she thought it was just her personality. But after 6 months of disciplined mental practice, reading every morning, questioning her thoughts, choosing her associations carefully, she was a different person. Not because her circumstances changed, but because she changed. She started a business she'd been afraid to start for 10 years. She had the idea all along. She had the ability all along, but she finally had the mental control to act on it. Last I heard, she'd built something remarkable. Same person, same talents, different mind. That's what mental mastery does. It doesn't just make you feel better, though it does that too. It makes you more capable. When you control your mind, you make better decisions. You see opportunities other people miss because they're too busy worrying. You solve problems faster because you're not wasting mental energy on fear and doubt. You persist longer because your mind isn't talking you out of things the first time they get difficult. Think about decision making for a minute. Every major decision in your life is influenced by your mental state. When your mind is undisciplined and chaotic, you make chaotic decisions. You're reactive, emotional, short-sighted. But when you've trained your mind, when you're in control of it, your decisions improve dramatically. You can think clearly under pressure. You can evaluate options without fear clouding your judgment. You can commit to a course of action without second-guessing yourself into paralysis. And here's something beautiful that happens. This mental mastery affects everyone around you. Your family feels it. When you're not controlled by worry and fear, you're more present with them. You're not bringing your mental chaos home and dumping it on the people you love. Your coworkers feel it. You become the steady one, the reliable one, the person who doesn't panic when things go wrong. Your clients feel it. They trust you more because you trust yourself. Mental mastery creates a ripple effect that touches every area of your life. Now, I want to be straight with you about something. This isn't a destination you arrive at where suddenly you've mastered your mind forever and you're done. It's an ongoing practice. Some days are easier than others. Some days your old thought patterns will try to creep back in. That's normal. That's human. The difference is now you have the tools. Now you know how to recognize when your mind is trying to control you, and you know how to take back control. The pull toward mental laziness never completely goes away. It's always there, tempting you to just let your thoughts run wild, to just react instead of respond, to just worry instead of think constructively. You've got to guard against it. You've got to stay vigilant. This is why the disciplines matter. They keep you sharp. They keep you in practice. They keep you as the master instead of the servant. Here's what I know for certain after all these years. Life is a mental game. The quality of your life is determined by the quality of your thinking. Not by what happens to you, but by what you think about what happens to you. Not by the circumstances you face, but by the thoughts you choose to think about those circumstances. You can have everything and be miserable if your mind is undisciplined. You can have very little and be fulfilled if your mind is under your control. So the question isn't whether you should control your mind. The question is, when are you going to start? And my answer to you is this: start now. Start today. Start with the very next thought that enters your mind. Will you examine it, or will you just accept it? Will you control it, or will it control you?